Hello, this is Haley Wazinski, the Physician and Program Relations Manager here at Practice Match. This webinar is um, about 6 items every CV needs to include. So, whether you already have a CV created or you've started to work on a CV or you are about to start working on a CV, you want to make sure that these 6 items are included within your CV itself. So, quick reminder before we jump into the webinar. The phone lines will be muted throughout the session. This is just to help prevent any excess background noise that can distract or interrupt the webinar. So if you do have any questions, I still do encourage you to ask those. Throw those in the questions chat box on the GoToWebinar panel. You can also wait until the end of the webinar to ask any questions that you have, or you can always email me at practicepath@practicematch.com with questions. But let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we want to make sure that we have on our CV is contact information. So that contact information is really important because a lot of times this is the way that potential employer or recruiter is going to be in touch with you. So with your contact information, one other important element to remember is that you want to put down good contact information. So you don't want to put down an email address that you either one, don't want to get contacted at, or two, you don't regularly check. Same thing with a phone number. So with contact information, we want to make sure that we're including a phone number, an email address, and then a newer option is a LinkedIn profile. So like I mentioned, we want to put down that good contact information. So as a physician, if I have a work email address that I don't feel comfortable getting emailed to by recruiters, I don't want to put that on there. Same thing with that phone number. You want to make sure that you're putting down information that you do not mind being contacted at. So especially with the email address, if you're like, I have my personal, I have my work email, really don't want to get emailed at either one of them, go to Gmail, go to Yahoo, create that free email address just for recruitment purposes. So make it Dr. First Initial Last Name, Dr. Last Name at Gmail or at Yahoo, or whatever other site that you know of that you can make that free email address just to use for recruiting. Because the nice thing with that is that once you have that email address, if you find the next opportunity and you're like, okay, I'm good to go, you don't have to keep up on that email address like you do for your personal or for your current work email. But if something happens and down the road you're like, oh, you know what, I need to look for a new opportunity, you can start using that email address and start, receiving those emails once again. So really good idea with that. Also, that LinkedIn profile. So like I mentioned before, this is a little bit newer, but what that LinkedIn profile would be is just the URL to your professional profile on there. What that will allow you to do is actually connect with the recruiter, with the organization on LinkedIn and have them communicate with you that way as well. So this is really great for networking, especially if you're not 100% sure where you want to go, but you want to have those connections out there. That's also a good way to be able to see kind of what comes up about that organization on a daily basis that they're sharing via LinkedIn or, on a weekly basis, monthly basis, whatever. But that's a really great way for you to, once again, be able to see what information is out there for them. If you don't currently have a LinkedIn profile, don't create one and not put like a picture or any other sort of information on there and put that on your CV. This is just if you do already have a LinkedIn profile that you're actively using, you're sharing articles, other, other medical related, studies or things of that nature that you would feel comfortable having a potential employer seeing. But then the second thing that we want to make sure that every CV has is dates. So dates are one thing that some people, they have it on every single thing. Others, it's kind of hit or miss. So with dates, the reason why we want to make sure that we have that on our CV is because the recruiters or employers, they go off a lot of those dates to see if you are going to fit with what they're looking for. For instance, for education or for training, for how long you've held previous positions. But with dates, I do also want to mention that there's two different ways that the dates are typically displayed. So some are just going to be only the year. So you don't have to put the month, you don't have to put anything else, just that year. For others, we're going to look more at the month and the year, so that way we can make sure that they have the full range of what we were doing when. So the dates that you only need a year for are going to include things like your education, if you're in any sort of professional organization or membership, as well as honors or awards. So with those, they don't necessarily need to know that you completed on your undergrad on, May 25th, 2011, or that you joined a professional organization on March 3rd. They don't need to know that. All they need to know is that year that you did, complete that education, that you joined that organization, or that you won that honor or award. For month and year dates, though, this is going to look more at things like your past experience. And the reason why we want both the month and the date for that is because whenever the potential employer is looking at you and they're looking at your work history, they want to see that pattern of how long have you been at each organization? Are you there for a few months and then you're not? Are you there for maybe a year? Or have you been working steadily, 3 or 4 years at each place that you've been at? Or are you doing locums work? So they want to see that past experience with the month and the year because that gives them a better sense of, is this going to be a good candidate for us? You also want to make sure that if you do have any sort of volunteerism on your CV, that you're putting the month and year down for that as well. So with the month and year dates, one thing to keep in mind is if you are still currently, working at that organization that you have listed on your CV, or you're still volunteering with an organization, you can put to present. You don't have to make up a date or update it monthly by adding the new month. Just put to present because then they'll know that you're still actively at that organization or that you're actively volunteering. Third thing that we want to make sure that our CV has is education and training. So the education and training portion is really important because what that's going to help tell them is basically, when did you complete your undergrad? When did you go to medical school? When did you start your residency or your fellowship? So we want to make sure that we have that information listed on our CV, but we also want to make sure that we have the necessary information listed as well. So for education, for instance, you want to list down that university or college or medical school. And from there, you also want to put the degree that you were awarded. So don't just put down, UMS or UMMS and then expect them to know everything else that happened there. You want to make sure that you're putting out that full college or medical school's name and not using those abbreviations because not everyone is going to know, especially if it's, U of I. Is that University of Illinois, University of Iowa, is that University of Idaho? So you want to make sure that you're making it easy for those organizations looking through your CV. Same thing with that degree awarded. Let them know what you actually got your degree in. And then you also want to make sure that you're putting down your completion year. So like I said, you don't have to give the exact date of I graduated on this day or I completed this month and year. You can just put the year on there. For training, we also want to make sure that we're putting down that program name. So once again, putting down the full program name, not putting down those abbreviations, just to make sure that that potential, employer knows where you completed your training at. You also want to put your specialty. So if you are, if you did an intern year and then you went into, internal med, and then you went into a fellowship, you want to make sure that you're putting all that info on there. So those are going to be listed separately. But after we list our specialty, we also want to put that completion year. So if you are currently in your last year of training or second to last year of training, and you're not, you have not completed yet, you're not going to be able to put down, completed and blah, blah, blah. What you can do though is that you can put down the year that you're expected to complete that training, put the year, and then put expected in parentheses. This is just an easy way for you as a physician to let them know, okay, I'm going to complete my residency or my fellowship in this year, and then I'm going to be available. So put that information down. We also want to make sure that on every CV that you have past experience. So this is one that I usually get a few more questions on because I get asked, well, what past experience do I need? Well, you want to keep in mind that with your CV, you're targeting this to that opportunity that you're applying to. So even if in high school or undergrad you put that or you worked at Target or Starbucks or any other sort of opportunity, this doesn't need to be on our CV. This has nothing to do with the medical field and you being a physician. You may have learned a lot of great things, working in teams or customer service, and you can translate that over into the medical world, but it's not relevant. So with your past experience, you want to put down those opportunities that are relevant to the new opportunity that you're applying to. So with the past experience, there is some specific information needed. And this is one spot that I see a lot of people struggle with as they start to create their CV. So with your past experience section or work history, whatever you're going to call it, you want to make sure that you're putting down your position title. So whatever your title was in that role, if it was attending, if it was, resident, fellow, whatever, you want to put down what your position title was. You also want to put down the organization name. So with that being said, once again, don't use, abbreviations or anything, but put down that organization's name that you worked at. You also want to put the location. This is one that a lot of people skip because they think, oh, I have the organization name on here, I'm good to go from here. One thing to keep in mind is that a lot of organizations, especially across the country, they share a similar name. So especially if you're not in that area and you say, oh, well, I worked at St. Joe's. Any Saint hospital, very, very common to find multiples of. But if you say, oh, yeah, I work at St. Joe's, and you don't put that you worked in St. Joe's in, Massachusetts, and you're applying to a job in Ohio, and they go, ooh, St. Joe's, we've heard a lot of complaints about physicians that we've taken from there in the past, you may be, looked past because they don't know which location you're at. So make sure that you are putting down the city and state for each location on your past experience section. You also want to put your start date and your end date. So once again, these are going to be in month and year form. So month and year to month and year, or if you're currently still working there, to present. But what that does, like I mentioned before, that gives them a good idea of, are you someone who is kind of a job jumper and you're only there for a few months at a time, or are you someone that, sticks out your contract and you've been at organizations but you've been there for multiple years. So make sure that each opportunity has those dates on there. I've also had people in the past go, I can't really remember when I started that. Can I just go around, around the time that I think I started? I definitely suggest against that because a lot of times with your CV, they're looking at those months and years, or, the months and years that you were at each one. So even if you're just a couple months off on a few of your past experiences, that can raise some red flags to them of, okay, well, why is this physician lying about how long they were at these organizations? So try to do some digging and investigating on your own if you can't remember the exact date. But you want to make sure that anything that you put on your CV is completely true. So don't just guess as to what your start or your end date was. And then lastly, with your experience, you want to put a brief description. So when I say brief, I mean 1 to 3 sentences. It should not look like a paragraph because what that does is it just makes your CV look very cumbersome and bulky, and it adds a lot of length to it. So CVs typically run anywhere between 2 to 5 pages, depending on if you did locums or if you have a ton of research or publication experience, that is going to add some length to your CV. But if you are coming straight out of training or straight out of only one other opportunity, if your CV is at 5 pages and you don't have that research or anything else in there, it's just because your job description or your training descriptions are so long, you need to reevaluate that CV. So with a description, should just be 1 to 3 sentences describing, what you did in that role a little bit, what your responsibilities were, and definitely focus on those key spots that are going to transfer over to the opportunity that you're currently applying to. Because that's going to show the experience that is relevant to this new opportunity. And then number 5, licensure and certifications. So at Practice Match, we do free CV reviews, and a lot of times one note that I make on there is any licensure or certifications to add. The reason why I put that on there is because you have to remember that as a physician, when you go through this, applying to opportunities and start interviewing process, it takes a while. Licensing in states can also take a while. So you want to make sure that, especially if you're applying somewhere like California or Texas where it takes a little bit longer, that if you already have a license in that state, you want to put that on there. So that just helps them out a little bit too, especially with organizations that are like, you know what, we need to hire a physician yesterday. We need to get you in here ASAP. If you are going to have to go through the whole licensing process, they may go, okay, you know what, this candidate looks great, but this candidate also looks great, and they have a license here. Maybe we should focus on this one right now. So just help yourself stand out a little bit more by putting that information out there. So with licensure, few things that you're going to want to list on there. Obviously, the first thing you want to list is the state that you have that license in. And then you want to list the status. So if it's pending, if it's active, inactive, you want to put all that information on your CV. Another question that I get about licensing is, do I need to put my license number down for these? It's completely up to you, to be honest. I've seen some people put their license number on there. I've seen others not put their license number on there. So it's what you feel comfortable with, because obviously your license number is going to be tied to you and your information. So if you feel uncomfortable putting it on there because, you know what, I just don't want that to be out there in case, for whatever reason my CV happens to leave that organization, I don't want others to have it, then don't put it on there. If that organization that you're applying to absolutely needs your license number, they're going to reach out to you to get that from you. So once again, it's totally a personal decision of, should I list that on there or should I keep it off? But with certifications, you want to put down that certification name, also the expiration date. So especially if it's something that you're going to have for a while, the next few years, you just got certified in it, you just got board certified, anything like that, put all that information on your CV for them. Especially with the board certifications, because there are some opportunities that you may be applying for that say you have to be board certified, and when they don't see it on your CV, especially if you applied for an opportunity, uploaded your CV via the internet, if they have a process that goes through that CV for them to make sure that everything looks okay in keywords, if you don't have that board certification on there, you can sometimes automatically get kicked out of that application process because you're not meeting their requirements. So make sure you're putting that information on your CV. And then lastly, page numbers. This one is just to help make sure that your CV stays together if anything were to happen. And the reason why I say that is just because if you're applying to an organization, there's a good chance you're not the only physician applying. So if they have a stack of CVs, somebody accidentally, bumps into them, knocks them over, all of a sudden, someone printed some out and it got lost in in a pile of papers, and they're trying to figure out whose is whose or anything like that, it just makes that a little bit easier on that organization to know, okay, here's your CV. So with page numbers, put it, your last name and then the page number, and it's as simple as that. Whenever you're on a Word document and you add those page numbers into your footer, just click into that little, footnote part and add your last name prior to the page number. Simple as that. That just helps to make sure that your CV stays in order, especially, like I said, if for whatever reason it would get lost from itself, basically, or mixed up. But any questions? If so, please email me at practicepath@practicematch.com, or you can call or text my cell phone at 314-745-0869. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you at another webinar.